So, my videos are taking a long time to upload, so this will be part 2 of going through the Cosmo. And I'll just, as I turn the pages, just tell you more about the EMF broadcast. I got some sleep, which is good. As I'm going over things that they say, I really didn't listen too much because I was sleeping, thankfully. So, that's a good thing. So as I was saying, a lot of what they have been telling me are criticisms of me, it's mainly criticisms. So they said they were trying to clone who I was, but someone came in with all these made up stories to stop them from cloning me. And they just said how they were invading my privacy to clone me. I don't really think that. I think that the cloning was part of it, but I think it was a way of trying to hurt me, trying to criticize me so that I would be destroyed. And when it came out that their lies were lies, then it became, well, how do we hurt her enough to destroy her? And I think that's why I was being hit in the head with this laser in the heat. And then they came up with this, trying to destroy my vision and trying to make me hear them. So I think, like I said in the beginning, these things they go from one level to the next, and it gets worse as it goes along. And I think in the beginning it was trying to be nice to me, to kind of make me fall for it. And when I didn't fall for it, that's when the stalking happened and the following me around happened. And then when that didn't work, that's when I think they came up with this new thing. So I think they just went from one thing to another, and then it just got so bad. And I think it got bad not just for me, but for them too. And that's the problem with this situation, is that, it's when something gets worse. And see, they were upset because you can tell I'm Fashion Fun Femme, because someone said, I've said something, and the person said, well, then the situation was exacerbated, meaning it worsened. And my reply was, in order to say something is exacerbated and getting worse, you have to first acknowledge that it existed. So if, for example, and this applies to this situation, in order to say that this stalking, using the technology, exacerbated as it went on, you have to first acknowledge that it started. So we can't say something is exacerbated if we don't think the thing exists. It's like saying something absurd. Like, say, for example, we know there isn't, I don't know, a talking tree. You can't say the talking trees were exacerbated. Well, there are no talking trees, so you can't say it exacerbated. You first have to establish this thing exists. And that's my point. Like, for example, when I'm talking to you about like this, it's not enough for me to say it worsened. Well, what worsened? The stalking. Well, they would say, well, that you aren't being stalked. It took it worsening. I had to first establish that it was happening in order to establish it was worsening. And that's my point. When someone is trying to dismiss the existence of things, like they are trying to dismiss the existence of the stalking, they say, well, it's not happening. Then when you say, well, how is it that I go to a police station and the next day someone vandalized my door? Then it had to be happening to begin with. So you can't establish an exacerbation of a situation without first establishing the situation. So the situation is that this happened. I have proof. And once we prove that, then we can say, well, it worsens over time. And that's my point. I feel like, and that happened, fortunately, on Twitter. So I have a record that the person wanted me to say it's exacerbating without first us being able to establish that it happened, and then it was exacerbated. So what happened over time, the same thing with that comment is the same thing with gang stalking. we establish that the thing existed, then we can establish a worsening of the thing. So it's like, and I'll use one more example before we go back to the magazine. So, like for example, I'm telling you here that in Cosmo, they talked about things that I wanted to talk about and that I was interested in. So you can't talk about something without establishing it happens. And that's what I think Cosmo did with a lot of us. They were able to, and I think that that's what a newspaper and a magazine should be. The ability to get something home, because sometimes you can't talk about these things outside. Get something home, open the page and say, I understand that it exists. And then once you can establish something exists, then you can say, well, it's getting better, it's getting worse. Hopefully some things got better. I know some things got worse, but that's what I'm saying about the people harassing me. It started out not as bad, and then it got worse, and now it's like they threatened to kill me, threatened to kill my mother, threatened to kill my family. And that's my point. That's how it escalates. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, so I can't see. Let's see. So this person's saying, trust your gut. If you feel uncomfortable or stressed about someone's behavior at work, you have the right to say something. Here are ways to respond. And that's my point. Okay. So this bartender, I think it's from the bartender, I'm not on the menu. And that's my point. My point is, this is talking about emotional violence. And that's what this is also. This is what gangstalking is. It's not just the physical violence. It's not just the break-ins. It's not the vandalism. It's not having to keep reporting it and keep documenting it. It's a form of emotional violence. It's telling, and I call them emotional vampires. I call them emotional vampires because there's a certain level of emotional stress, emotional draining of a person that makes everything worse. So yes, it is emotional violence. So they also, said, oh, I didn't wear blazers until after 8th grade. No, that's another lie. And that's my point. Not only is that a lie, but it just goes to show that they were trying to come up with a way of cloning my personality, cloning my lifestyle, cloning who I was. And they were trusting all sorts of weird stuff. And that's my point about this. It seems that instead of being, honest, I guess, and saying, well, we want to clone you. Could you provide the information in exchange for being compensated? No, they just stole. That's stealing. That's stealing. So they wanted to accuse me of stealing when I haven't stolen. But they stole. And that's my point. Like, maybe that's what I'm feeling about this whole gangstalking thing. They accuse me of what they're doing. So the very thing that they do that I have to be guilty of, I'm not. So they said, well, we'll say a word in the background that you normally say. And then when you say it, then you have to give us credit. No, I don't. I don't want you in my life. If I'm such a horrible everything, you wouldn't want me to give you credit, because that would mean I must be doing something right. And I guess that's where the logic comes in. And I said in a previous video about how they make you lose your train of thought. And I also said how the difference between AI and humanity is that we have emotions, and our emotions lead us to the next thing. That's the difference. There's a lack of emotion in what they say, but there's also a lack of common sense. Now, that's something that they should program the computer to give them, because it doesn't make sense that you would want credit for someone's work if you don't